Hey everyone, it's Synth Designer back again with another video. Today I'm going to talk about the importance of using samples as part of your sound design. Now there's a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to show you a couple of examples through Serum, and we're going to talk about how to use samples and then how to kind of incorporate them within other wavetables just to make your sounds a lot more interesting. So let's listen to a couple examples, and then we're going to get right into it. Here's this kind of weird organ-y type of sound, and I'm going to play it with and without the noise sample. Then we have this keys sound here, and let's hear it without the sample first. Now with the sample. So let's start with this organ sound here. So I'm going to play you just the sample, and then we're going to talk about how I kind of incorporate these samples into my sound design. So let's just hear it. Now, if you're familiar with my channel at all, you'll kind of recognize that sound as one of my opening little intros. And I just liked the sound, and I felt like that could really contribute nicely to this sound. So what I like to do is, in this case, the sample was just one note. So it's a lot easier when that happens. If you have samples with multiple notes, then what you'll have to do oftentimes is attach an envelope to them and then essentially get it to play only the one note. Now, if you have a bunch of notes in succession, it's going to be a little bit more difficult, but if you have longer sustained notes, then all you have to do is essentially get the envelope to decay completely by the time the first note is done, right? So either you could do that through your amp envelope or another envelope where you can control the dynamics of it, so say the level. In this situation, all I had to do was have it on envelope 1 because it's only one note anyway, so it's not going to repeat differently. However, if I had the sustain all the way up, listen what happens. So it's going to keep playing it because it's on a loop. In this situation, you can turn on the one shot here, and that will control it. So this is, you don't want it to keep looping, right? So you only have this playing once. So there's a couple ways essentially of controlling that. In this situation, I kind of wanted to have a sound that was more than just a fully sustained sound, and that comes into play later with the oscillators as well. So the cool thing is, if you're making a song and you have, say, some chords or something like that, or some other type of sound you like, save that as an audio file. Then what you can do is load it into Serum. Now, if you have a different synthesizer with a kind of sampler, then you could do the same thing there. But in Serum, it's so easy because you could just load it right into your noise oscillator, right? And then you have just this interesting sound already. And from there, you can build off of it. So what I like to do is, of course, turn on the key tracking, because if you have key tracking off, it's only going to play one note. Doesn't matter which keys you play. But if you turn on key tracking, it's going to differ depending on which key you play. In this case as well, you may have to pitch it to the right pitch in relative to your other wavetables. So wavetables are obviously going to match your pitch automatically. These might not match perfectly. As you can see here, when you turn on key tracking, it goes by semitones, and I have this 12 semitones, so I have an octave up before it would have been too low and wasn't matching very well. And I found like that just adds a nice dimension to it. That's a great thing about adding samples. They're already going to be harmonically rich. That's the best part. Because if you have just this one wavetable, you're going to have to kind of depend on whatever harmonics it has. You can manipulate it in lots of different ways, but with a chord, for example, or a already developed sound, you've already developed all those rich harmonics, and what you're doing is adding on to your wavetable. So as you can see here, I have a couple different ones, completely different. I wanted this one to add a lot more of that high register. And then what I did here in the effects was add some compression, some multiband compression. Adds a lot of that high-end kind of screeching to it. Some chorus here, reverb, and I EQ'd out some of the lows. And then I filtered out some more of the highs as well. So that's kind of an interesting way of just adding some interesting harmonics to your sounds. It doesn't have to be too complicated. I don't want to get into all the effects here, but as you can hear, it really makes a difference here with the noise on and off. You could definitely hear it adds a little bit low end and some definite kind of, I want to say kind of just noise that you wouldn't have otherwise. And yes, you could sometimes add that with just a regular noise oscillator, but I think this adds something really interesting to the sound. Now for my second example here, I did the same thing essentially, but I have this one 14 semitones down. So again, sometimes it takes a little bit of ear training, I guess, or manipulation to find the right sound. To me, this sounds a lot like kind of those 90s type of sounds that you hear, those 90s leads or 90s basses sometimes. And I mean, it couldn't be a bigger difference in this situation. So sometimes you can match up the pitch perfectly, and other times not as much. So sometimes you'll have to kind of think about if you want to put in mono. So in this example, because it's such a specific note, let me play you just the sample on its own. You could hear it's a chord, right? There's multiple notes playing essentially behind that and multiple harmonics. So in those cases, you'll have to match that a little bit more carefully with your wavetables. You can't necessarily play any note with any note, right? Because you're going to be clashing different, it's going to become too dissonant, right? So in this case, I had to put it in mono, because if I don't put it in mono, here's what happens. The notes just don't match with each other with any chord. So maybe I will be able to find some chords that match nicely, but there's going to be a lot of different chords that really don't go together well. So in this situation, it's kind of a lead mono type of sound. I just want to mention as well, if you're interested in Serum presets, head over to my Patreon page. For $2 a month, I send about 10 to 15 different unique Serum presets, and they're all sorts of themes. So sometimes we do some lo-fi, chill wave stuff, some 90s dance stuff. Other times it's kind of like modern LFOs. Other times it might be just kind of fun samples I play with, synthwave, anything you can think of really. Of course, I release everything on my website for free in full packs, but sometimes I'll release stuff on Patreon just because I have some cool presets that I came up with and I just want to share them. But back to this. So I'm hoping you're kind of getting the understanding here that this noise sampler in Serum and in other VSTs as well offers a really unique way of creating your own sounds. We all want to sound kind of unique, and what better way than to use samples, say, of your own songs or your own creations from before. Write out some chords, play around with different synthesizers, bounce that to audio, and then put it back into Serum. The amount of possibilities is pretty much endless, and you'll find that you'll really be creating some unique sounds. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you next time.